just for your benefit, Maggie, before you leave, I have a backlog on.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to unmute the room now.
It is 4 o'clock, so we will begin today's meeting of the Heritage Commission, October 12th, 2022. Can we start with a call to order? And then a confirmation from the staff that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
I can confirm that the packet was posted and the notice was provided.
Thank you. And a roll call, please.
We'll have a roll call. Youth Member Silverman,
Oh, present.
Mr. Gilmore, Commissioner Mike Sell,
Present.
Commissioner Martin,
Present.
Commissioner Baffa,
Present.
Commissioner Ivy, Commissioner Seibel,
Present.
Chair Gillum.
Here.
So with a 7-member board, we have a quorum of 5 members present, and we are able to conduct today's business.
Okay, then we will begin with the approval of the minutes from the September 28th, 2022 special meeting. So I'll give everyone a couple minutes to review those and ask any questions that they may have of staff.
So I believe that has the result of your election of officers. So if anybody wants to dispute what's in there, then this is their chance to do it.
Okay.
I move we approve.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes of the September 28th special meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We will then move on to new business, our public hearing items. We have item 3.1 today, application HC 22-2. Consider a request from the State Historic Preservation Office for comments on the eligibility of Pioneer Hall at the Kansas Wesleyan University campus for potential listing on the National Register of Historic Places and the Register of Historic Kansas Places under the Certified Local Government Agreement between the City of Salina and the SHPO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item is coming to the Heritage Commission from the State Historic Preservation Office. In August of this year, the City Commission approved the renewal of our Certified Local Government Agreement with the State Historic Preservation Office. And as a certified local government, we were notified that this had been placed on the agenda for the Kansas Historic Sites Board of Review. And so there's about a 60-day window that the state provides, and they want to receive confirmation from the local community that there is support for the nomination and that the local Historic Preservation Commission believes that it is a historic property worthy of preservation. And so the particular property here, which is scheduled to be considered by the Kansas Historic Sites Board of Review on November 5th, is the Pioneer Hall on the Kansas Wesleyan University campus. And so you can read some of the details as to why it took so long to complete, but Pioneer Hall was constructed over an 8 to 9 year period of time between 1922 and 1930, and it serves as the main administrative building and is really the heart of the Kansas Wesleyan University campus. Also, if you're driving south on Santa Fe, it's kind of the marker for the southern terminus of Santa Fe Avenue. And so the building itself is 4 stories tall. It's designed in a collegiate Gothic style. The exterior features variegated red brick with Carthage limestone detailing. And as we noted, it's the centerpiece of the main campus. It is not currently on the list of local landmarks in the city of Salina, but in 1997 it was designated as a heritage conservation property. And the heritage conservation listing means that it's protected from demolition or removal from this site without Salina Heritage Commission review and approval. So Kansas Wesleyan has retained the services of Brenda Spencer with Spencer Preservation, and she has produced a nomination form for Pioneer Hall. She has visited Salina on several occasions to document the physical condition of the structure, conducted archival research and interviews about the history of the buildings and the ownership through the years. There was a draft nomination form was prepared. We received a copy of the notice and of that draft on September 6th, and at that time, when we met on the 28th of September, we asked about the Heritage Commission's availability to have a special meeting on today's date to review the nomination. And so they have nominated this under two categories. One is under the category of how it relates to the history of the Kansas Wesleyan campus and the Salina community, and the second criteria is its architectural significance. So we have indicated in the report that the campus, the main campus for Kansas Wesleyan, was donated by the city of Salina to attract a university to be positioned at the south end of Santa Fe Avenue, and Kansas Wesleyan opened its doors in 1886. They also had a downtown building, a downtown business school that was located at Walnut and Santa Fe, and that was later spun off and turned into the Brown Mackey Business College at a later date. And so what this nomination would do would to assure a protective review of projects that could adversely affect the character of this property. If you approve this listing, we would note that historically in Kansas there was what was called environs review. That has been eliminated, so placement of this property on the National Register would not impact surrounding properties as it once did prior to 2013. And so if this gets placed on the state and national register as a certified local government, if there's any physical changes to the exterior, additions to the building, those types of things, those would be reviewed by the Heritage Commission. If there's anything specific that Kansas Wesleyan might be seeking reimbursement for through the National Rehabilitation Tax Credits, that is administered by the Historic Preservation Office. So we, as a local government, don't participate in the tax credit process, but we do conduct the review of any physical changes to the building. So we've provided you with some information about the flow of events and the historic significance of the building. One thing that we noted was that Kansas Wesleyan made a decision to only proceed with construction of the building if they had money on hand, and if they didn't have money on hand, they stopped and then started and restarted. So there was some slow progress between the start date and when it was dedicated in 1930. But there was also a notable gift from the Sams family, and that resulted in the Sams Chapel, which is a 1,500-seat auditorium that's inside Pioneer Hall. There's also a notable mural inside Pioneer Hall as well. And so there was a dedication ceremony for this building in 1930, and at that time the building was officially named the Hall of the Pioneers, and then that is known today as Pioneer Hall. And so today we have business offices, student services, the Sam's Chapel, and various departments and classrooms there. At one time, the Student Activity Center was in the lowest level of the building, but Kansas Wesleyan built a new student center and moved that function out of the building. The other thing we noted is this is the dominant building on the campus. It is a significant example of what's known as the collegiate Gothic style of architecture, and it was designed by Wichita architect Lorenz Schmidt, who was active in designing schools and churches and Wichita landmarks from 1915 to 1952. And so one of the things that makes it notable is it hasn't been modified much from its original Gothic design, and it was designed by an architect of note in the Kansas community of architects. And so Mr. Schmidt was one of the pioneers in the licensing and registration of Kansas architects. He worked to form professional associations. He gave scholarships to architecture schools at Kansas State and Kansas University, and he might be best known for designing Wichita East High School. And so what you're being asked to look at is to look at the historical significance, the information that's been provided, the photographs, the architectural significance, whether you believe that this is distinctive architecture and that it has stood the test of time. So we have reviewed this, and we do think that there's 4 potential findings that you could make as a commission to support a recommendation to the City Commission that this be found eligible for listing on the National and State Register. And so those 4 findings we have listed on page 8 and 9 of your report. The first being that Pioneer Hall is the centerpiece of the Kansas Wesleyan University campus, and the development of that campus is closely intertwined with the history of Salina and its commercial and economic development. Pioneer Hall is associated with events and an educational institution that's made a significant contribution to Salina's historical development. This building does have a distinctive, identifiable architectural style known as Collegiate Gothic, and it does retain a high degree of historic and architectural integrity to its original style of architecture. So following any comments made by the public, by representatives of Kansas Wesleyan, any discussion you have, you could concur with the findings in the nomination form and recommend to the City Commission that Pioneer Hall, you believe, meets the applicable criteria for listing on the Kansas Register of Historic Places and the National Register of Historic Places. You could decline to concur with those findings, and you could make a recommendation that the City Commission find that this does not meet the applicable criteria for eligibility. Or you could continue this hearing until such time as additional information can be obtained concerning the potential eligibility of this structure and be presented to the Commission. So if you find any holes or information that's lacking in the nomination form or anything provided by staff, you could postpone this to a future meeting date, and you would need to indicate that at the date and time in your motion. So if both you and the City Commission agree that this nomination meets the criteria, then this will appear on the agenda for the Kansas Historic Sites Board of Review on November 5th. If there is not an agreement that it is eligible, then the Historic Sites Board of Review will delay placing it on the agenda because it lacks local support. So this is being done because we are a certified local government and the state wants to receive comment, and we did send letters out to property owners, of owners within 200 feet of this property, and we did receive some feedback from John Marietta, who owns property within 200 feet of the campus, and he wanted the commission to know that he fully supports the nomination of this property to the state and national register. So with that, I'd be open to any questions you have about the report. We provided the report and some photographs, as well as the very extensive nomination form that was filled out that had a lot of interesting information and photographs in it. So with that, if you have questions to me about the review process, we do have John Swaggerty from Kansas Wesleyan on via Zoom, and so if you have specific questions about Kansas Wesleyan's plans or goals, you should direct those to Mr. Swaggerty.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Anybody have questions for staff at this time?
This is kind of a two-part question. Have other of Mr. Schmidt's buildings, such as Wichita East, been placed into National Historical Registries?
I do not know the answer to that. I only know that it is considered to be Mr. Schmidt's most notable design, and I would have to check with the listing of what properties that are on that nomination list for the city of Wichita. There is a way on the State Historic Preservation Office website. They have essentially a county by county breakdown, and you can look on that website and see what properties are on the National Register in the city of Wichita or in Sedgwick County generally, but we did not search that out when we were writing our report.
Noting this, would him having other buildings in the National Registry be more of a beneficial factor, or just a factor at all in the consideration of this building?
I think if you read the nomination form, Ms. Spencer, who put this together, seemed to spend a lot of time on Mr. Schmidt's reputation and his career and his other work, and I believe that is a factor that adds weight to the nomination, that it was designed by a prominent architect, and that is something that is a valid consideration for any building if it is designed by an architect that was notable in the architectural profession.
If the board doesn't have any additional questions for staff, I would invite Mr. Swaggerty to speak if he has anything additional to add.
I don't have anything additional to add at this time. I appreciate the board taking their time to review the package and look forward to the findings.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Swaggerty?
I guess we would want to, I believe that there is a plan at least circulating to make a minor addition or some modifications to the south side of this building. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct at this time.
Yeah. So in terms of timing, if this property is placed on the state and national register and there is a project put forward, and even if that project involves tax credits, this commission would review any additions or physical modifications proposed for this building. And it was staff's understanding that there was some thought about doing a project that would modify the south entryway into this building.
That is correct, that there is a project to modify the south end of the facility. All of that, the plans and everything like that for the addition is in the package that was submitted to the State Historical Society by Ms. Spencer.
Okay. So they'll review this nomination with knowledge that there is a modification proposed to the south entrance.
Any further discussion from board? Since it is a public hearing item, I would invite any other public that's here to speak, but it doesn't appear we have any online, do we, Dustin?
No, I would confirm that we do not have anyone from the public on Zoom right now.
Yeah, the only thing I was able to report is we sent notice of today's meeting out, and I received a response from Mr. John Marietta, and he said he was not able to attend today's meeting, but he did want to convey his support for this nomination to the commission. So I told him I would pass that along.
Okay. Well, if the board has no other questions,
Make
Everyone in the room is,
comments.
everyone in the room is staff.
yeah.
So
So
we're-
I was
we're all
thinking
staff.
about it.
Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't-
so if we have no public comment, which it doesn't appear that we do, and the board has no additional questions of either staff or Mr. Swaggerty, then I would entertain a motion at this point.
Is it up to me?
No, it's up to anybody.
I recommend to the city commission that we concur with the findings in the nomination form, that Pioneer Hall meets the applicable criteria for eligibility for listing of the property on the Kansas Register of Historic Places and the National Register of Historic Places.
Would anybody like to second that motion?
I'll second it.
So we have a motion and a second to concur with the findings in the nomination form. Findings that staff had stated in their report, that the Pioneer Hall does meet the applicable criteria for eligibility for listing on the Kansas Register of Historic Places as well as the National Register of Historic Places. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
So that recommendation will go to the city commission on Monday, October 24th, and we'll prepare what we would call a resolution of support. If the city commission adopts that resolution of support, we will convey your recommendation and the city commission's recommendation up to the state. And so we try to schedule this so that we can get that feedback up to them before they meet on November 5th. So we do appreciate you taking the time and agreeing to hold a special meeting to consider this.
And as far as the remainder of our agenda, it doesn't appear like we have any additional items, and seeing as there is no public here today or online, I am thinking we can skip the public forum section. Is there anything else you had for us today, Mr. Andrew?
No, other than there was some question just about how something becomes a landmark or doesn't become a landmark, and I was just going to share that the only time in our research, we found that the city, through the Heritage Commission or City Commission, initiated making a building a landmark was the case of the Missouri Pacific Railroad depot that's on North Santa Fe, and it's just a historical fact that railroad companies are very resistant to having their properties placed on historical registers or landmarks. Certainly, the Union Pacific Depot over on 12th Street would be something that is potentially eligible, but the city has taken the approach on landmarks that someone essentially nominates their property or someone nominates it, and it's done by consensus, and not in the case of the Missouri Pacific Depot. The city initiated making that a landmark. The railroad resisted, but the city designated it anyway, and it is now there, and it's been rehabbed for offices. And so I just wanted to share that it can be initiated by the city or by a body such as the Heritage Commission, but the most normal course is that an owner of property seeks a landmark designation, and it's done voluntarily. So there was a question about why this property was not a landmark already, and the reason that I can find is that Kansas Wesleyan University did not seek to have landmark status for this building, and so it's gone from being a conservation property to possibly being on the National Register. So that's just a explanation for why this building wasn't already a landmark.
To change the subject, would there be any advantage for the Heritage Commission to have a representative from the Design Review Board, or vice versa?
Well, there is potential overlap there, but the thinking, at least when the Heritage Commission was created in 1979 and the bylaws and membership was set up, was that the historic preservation code is part of the zoning ordinance, and since it's part of the zoning ordinance, that it made sense to have a planning commissioner be a member or representative on the Heritage Commission, so there was a connection between the zoning ordinance and historic preservation. There is some overlap there, but it would require an amendment of the ordinance that set up the Heritage Commission originally to make that change.
Probably not worth it then.
Well, we hope, what we hope to do is, and have at least, is to have the good communication so that each board and commission knows what the other is doing. There was an example of a case of a home at 5th and Mulberry where the Design Review Board reviewed a proposed demolition of that home, and the Heritage Commission viewed it differently and wanted to see the home saved and relocated, and that is what occurred. So even when we have overlaps like that, there's going to be cases where the heritage, either heritage conservation property or the historic districts lap up against a historic district, and the Design Review Board is looking at the architectural character of the downtown area, and this commission's is looking at a broader area than just downtown, so that you do have different missions. But that is all staff wanted to add, and we do not, our agreement was if we had this special meeting, we will not have our regularly quarterly meeting at the end of October, and our next meeting will just be based on when we have an item to come before the commission. We'll contact the chair and see about availability to schedule a special meeting if we receive an application that needs Heritage Commission review.
Okay. On that note, I would take a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
So moved.
Anybody second?
I'll second.
Motion second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you, everyone.